I just thought of some examples from my end that are not necessarily like the legalist conversation on like how the church hurts, but where you can kind of get trapped on the service side.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, you have a great story on this one.
This is one thing that churches
let's hear this one. Mike got ramrod hard.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but this is what churches a lot of times do is they're like what do you call them? Like just factories of volunteers.
Free labor, dude.
Yeah, they're
it's like prison camp, dude.
Yeah,
making them license.
They like guilt trip you into doing all this volunteer work because their whole operation runs with volunteers.
Yep.
Which is good. Like it's good to serve the church. But a lot of times you kind of get taken advantage of, or it just burns you out over time.
Exactly.
And I
talk about that.
Yeah, because I remember in college I like worked on I did the tech stuff like for the group I was in, and I did that I think for like 2 or 3 years straight.
Wow.
And you get like I felt trapped in the position because I'm like if I don't do this, there's like literally no one to take my position. But now I never get to enjoy the service as an attendee.
Dang, yeah.
So I'm never really like connecting with the service and how I would like to sometimes. So then you like, I felt trapped.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I was like, I don't want to touch service again because you get like, you feel guilty if you're saying no. And so that kept me out of like even wanting to do service for probably 5 years.
Let's go back to Paul because Paul had this trouble.
Mike.
It's great because that's a great story for people to be able to discern. Because you have to know how to serve and when to serve, and
you got to know like how to say no.
That's right. So Paul, you'll see this happening in all of his letters. He's like, I know you guys want me to come back and be with you, and my heart is there. Like I want to be with you right now, but I have this to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's saying no. He's saying I can't be there for you right now, but here's why. Right, my service is needed here for this church, your brothers. Right. So you want me to do this, and it's kind of selfish in some ways, but I have to go do this. And that's why and this is a problem with church. And this is a very good example. If you give your sovereignty up to your pastor where he's making all the decisions for you spiritually, you have now given up your sovereign relationship with Christ to make those decisions too. There's going to be times where you disagree with your pastor, or he's going to say, you need to do this. And you're going to be like, no, I really feel like the Spirit is leading me to do this. That's tough stuff, man. And you better be like devoted. Know you're right when that happens, because if he's just holding you in that black room and you're like, hey, pastor, I need some reprieve here. All right. I love serving, but I need time. And he's just like, nah, dude, you got to do this. You got to.
Most of the time they're not going to do that, but you're going to feel the guilt. Like you're going to feel it.
After watching that one, or they keep increasing the workload, keep asking more and more and more of you. You get to feeling like the house on the horse on Animal Farm. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think another.
Well, then that was you needing to learn how to speak up.
Well, yeah. And I think another side of that is, especially for like husbands with your wives, like the great thing I watched my dad do, like my mom would serve in the nursery and stuff at church. He forced her to say no sometimes.
He had to.
Yeah. He like protected his wife in that, my mom. And I think that because women out, like if I'm super disagreeable as a guy, and if I'm not willing to say no a lot of times in those church circumstances, what do you think a woman's going to do?
Right.
She'll just let herself get taken advantage of big time.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good thing. Like wives love to serve, and husbands need to protect them in that because you'll burn you out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. I agree. That's a very good, and that balances the equation. We're constantly doing that as the Iron Disciples because when it's black and white, you have to see both sides, right? It's usually a sign of spiritual maturity when you're willing to serve the church and give some of your time to the church. And so you're stepping out in faith. You're going to learn the lessons you learned by doing that. And serving is not an easy task.
And frankly, the problem this probably stems from is because so few people serve that the church has to take advantage of those willing to.
That's a good point, Mikey. Yeah,
that's a good point.
And they feel the sense of like, we're holding this thing together. Like it's like
someone else will. Like the second time I kind of got roped, or I don't want to use the word rope, but I was serving on the greeter team at the church before I moved down to Florida, and then I got pulled into being like the manager of the greeter team I was on, and then you get to realize how crappy it is dealing with volunteers because they just don't show up, or they'll be like 10 minutes before, like, sorry, I can't make it, and then like their responsibility is supposed to be like, if you can't make it, you're supposed to find a replacement. They never do, so then you have to deal with it, and then you just want to like flip the table over and like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah,
these people are volunteers. They have no obligation, and they treat it that way.
Leadership positions are brutal.
Yeah. So, you know, you do have to protect yourself in those circumstances. Otherwise, you're going to burn out, and then you're just going to put your hands up and be like, I'm done with the church.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that has to do with having spiritual maturity to say, I am going to put myself in submission to God and then the church, right? Like my pastor is not Jesus. You know, he's not the guy who's, I'm not prostituting my sovereignty to him because I want to make my life easier. You know, like he's a guide, he's a shepherd. And ultimately, you're going to have to decide how to handle saying no. You're going to have to learn those hard lessons.
Well, some churches are super rich and they just take advantage of people. Like, you know, some churches, you know, they're rich, bro. Them bitches is rich. And they're asking all these guys to just do all this, you know, volunteer work. It's like, maybe you could pay them. If you have the money, maybe you could pay them. Like, that's not unbiblical. Like, Paul talks about your service and being paid for it.
You know, that reminds me of that
some churches take a darn advantage of people.
We watched that thing for that one pastor for the Hillsong. What was his name?
I don't know. Crazy Australian guy.
Armstrong.
Yes. Yeah. And so
I love
the guys, like that Australian massive college they have. Do you remember all the kids? They were just like, we were sick of it, dude. We were just being slave driven and we could not do anything we wanted to. And they could have paid him for a degree that they couldn't use anywhere too. It's brutal. That is brutal. That's dark.
Yeah. Those would be the mega churches. But yeah, they're little
usually
tiny. Yeah. 12-person church probably ain't going to run like that.
Nah.